Hi, everybody. Welcome to Astrology Unplugged. I'm Rick DiClemente with a frog in my throat, and we'll try to put up with it tonight and see what we can do. Tonight, I have egg on my face. It's kind of over here because I was working too fast. On Tuesdays, I tried to determine what the show will be like on Thursday, and I decided to do New Year's Day, midnight, 2023, which was for Greenwich, England. And that will tell us what's coming for the whole planet for 2023. But my fingers wrote 1923. And you see, if I was a better astrologer, I would have noticed that the sun was opposite Pluto. And I even talked about it. The sun was opposite Pluto. Oh boy, we had to deal with sun opposite Pluto. Well, the sun can't be opposite Pluto because the sun's in Capricorn and Pluto. So they would be next to each other. So I had to swallow my pride and put out a corrected statement. And the second chart for 223 is much, much milder. So that might make you happy to hear that. A couple notes about the show. Ksenia Moore, my wonderful friend in Australia and great astrologer, will be my guest as my 300th show on January 5th, I believe it is. January 5th. What should I say? Let me. Okay, anyhow, I will be off. I'll be on all these weeks, but I am taking off the last 2 Thursdays of the year. So I'll be off on the 22nd and the 29th, and I'll be here all the other Thursdays. And the 5th will be the show 300, and Ksenia will be my guest. And we are going to blow it out. We decided that we're going to talk about why everybody needs to learn astrology and how you're really hurting yourself if you don't know it. We're just going to blow it out. So we're going to see what happens. Usually that doesn't work, so we'll see. Tonight's a really marvelous night with the planets. I'll show you why you want to have a baby tonight. If you're in a hurry, let's get that baby out there. Tonight's wonderful energy. Matter of fact, it might be too wonderful. We see Jupiter, Neptune, which I'm always marveling about. Jupiter, Neptune at 22 degrees, and the moon is in between. And it's in the 9th house, and there's a T-square to it. So this is somebody with a phenomenal peace-loving Jesus type of mentality with those things to offer and teach. Also, this Venus is opposite Mars, which is very charming, and it makes a T-square to the moon Venus, moon Neptune. So it's pretty nice. We do have, and I think this makes sense, Pluto sitting on the descendant, air is square to it. So it's very powerful also. This is going to be a very special evening. Now, I'm concerned about how it's going to be a special evening when the chart that I dug up for 2023 is just not that interesting. But I'm going to show it to you, and we'll get started. So this chart, in order to do one for the year, you do it for the central place on the globe, and that is Greenwich, England. That's 0 longitude. And you pick out midnight on January 1st and do the chart for them. So here's the chart I came up with. Okay. So you see that not only the sun opposite Pluto disappeared, since this is done correctly, for January 1st, 2023, at 0 minutes of Greenwich time. But we see everything shifted to the right, which is pretty intriguing. We have the Libra rising. That means the ruler of the chart is Venus. We see a very heavy duty Capricorn 4th house. We see the wonderful Jupiter Neptune in the 6th house of service. We see these very questionable Moon Uranus in the 8th house. Not sure what that means. It's going to take some dialogue. But if you look at it another way, which I have on the desktop, you'll see let's see here. Okay. So on this one, I highlighted the Uranus. You can see the highlights of Eris square to Pluto, Venus, Mercury. So what looks mild turns out to be not so mild. The rest of the chart is not so bad. Now you got to remember that in almost all situations, I would imagine every year, the sun is going to be at the bottom. Always. Because Greenwich, England, midnight charts, the sun is near the bottom. So what that tells you is that these charts in particular are about the general mood of all the countries on the planet. And it's interesting to note that what most countries focus on for the year is 4th house stuff. Sun, Mercury, Venus, Pluto. What does that mean? That means taking care of yourself, taking care of your country, taking care of your family, taking care of yourself. And that's a pretty good idea when you're in the mix with all the other 150, whatever number of countries there are. We look and see Venus rules the chart, which is a nice factor. We see Venus is next to Pluto, same degree, and square to Eris. So this Eris is big enough just squaring Pluto, but it's also squaring Eris to Pluto and Venus and Mercury. Okay, let's talk about that some coming out of the 7th house. All right. There is a force out there now. Everybody's talking about it, but the astrologers are the correct ones because they're telling you what is exactly real. More people coming in the doorway. What I mean by that, when Eris is square to Pluto, we don't even have to talk about where it is, just those two energies. You have this old-time 1930, old-time, butt-kicking, intense, passionate planet called Pluto that has given us anything from atomic weapons to nuclear power to racial dissatisfaction to the Holocaust, lots of things. It's a very heavy planet having to do with the evolution of the species. It's not much different than Eris. Eris wasn't discovered till 2005. Now remember, Eris's story is about, I'm not going to put up with any more unfairness. I'm not going to put up with any more unfairness, anybody being treated unfairly, anybody being left out. Injustice. That's what Eris is about. Now you mix these two together. Pluto is the voice of you must find and harness that passion within you and become courageous to move on with your evolution. Eris is about we must all do it together, but we're not going to goof around anymore. That's the difference with Eris. All these other planets have allowed all this stuff to happen for a long time until 2005. Then someone came along incorrectly and said they were going to clean up the swamp in DC. It made the swamp much worse. But that was that person's attitude anyway. So it's very much in all of us now. And what you've got to be feeling is this. When you really lay back and you watch America through the years, you see a pretty laid back country. Easy going, like their easygoing time, like their vacations. Yes, they do hard work. Yes, they pay their taxes, etc., etc. But it does not have the sense of hardship over its head like the Europeans and the Russians have had, or the Indians, or the Pakistanis, or the people in Africa. Just about everywhere, they got hardship hanging over their heads. Not America. That's changing. And we're not comfortable with it. It's new to us. We're not quite sure how to do it. Americans are stepping up, and it's a wonderful thing to see as we approach March and April, which is when Pluto will go out of Capricorn and enter into Aquarius for about 15 years. So the fact is, we've got Pluto squaring Eris. Okay, when they're square to each other, what squares usually do is bring out the worst in the other. In this case, they can really bring out the violence of the other, and this one brings out the violence of that one. And on the good side, squares also bring good sides. On the good side, Pluto is known for its bumper sticker. If you're behind a Pluto truck, the bumper sticker is, it's time for sweeping changes. That's what Pluto says. Look at yourselves, interview people around you that went through Pluto times, and see if they didn't go through sweeping changes. By the way, I'm curious, I don't want to forget. I want to go back one step. Last week, I did the charts of 5 fabulous female singers. Several of them you didn't know. Did anybody in the group look up those 5? Did anybody go out there and listen to any of them? And what'd you think? Erica and John?
Beautiful voices. I was listening to the folk singer.
Joni? Oh, you mean Eve?
No, yeah, the one that I didn't know, Eve Cassidy.
Eva Cassidy, yeah.
Yeah, I introduced her to one of my clients who loves to listen to music.
Oh, beautiful voice. What do you think, John? You're muted.
I was very impressed with Phoebe Snow.
Oh my God, is she a powerhouse?
Oh my God, I was amazed.
I know. Well, it's ridiculous for me to try to put them in order, but I'm glad that the 2 of you got turned on to 2 great ones. Okay, so when we look at next year, and I use that P word in my advertisement for this week, which is called predictions. I don't like to do predictions. I think they're jive. I think they're a misuse of astrology, but I do think there is a place for them to get us heads up for things that are coming. Okay, so what are we seeing? We're seeing all this stuff in the 4th house, which means everybody on the planet in general is trying to hide and get their head in the sand. So they'll be safe. In general, people are trying to lay low. So the stuff doesn't hit the fan. There's my kitty cat. But Eris is square to it. Eris is square to all these 4 planets that want to put their head in the sand. And what do you think that means? Use your logic. What do you think this butt-kicking Eris planet that ain't going to let anything rest, that will bring about whatever it has to adopt these changes, it's shaking up all this 4th house stuff. That means that when the collective gets involved, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen at the individual points. Well, when Eris is involved and it's bugging that Pluto and Venus and all that Mars, we're going to be pushed from within and from without to get out of our comfort zone. Number one. The number one thing is going to happen. Why? Because we'll have to. Period. No reason for it. Because if evolution is going to continue and not die, that's the necessary step. I don't have to tell anybody that. Everybody knows that. We're going to have to get out of our comfort zone. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to have extreme hardship, but it does mean we're going to have to care and get more involved politically, probably. You cannot minimize Zoom when you are. Okay, thank you. All right. So you can see from the Pluto square Eris, it's going to be very significant. Now, looking back at the graphic one, while Eris is going to really stay put for a whole year, doesn't move much in a year's time, and Pluto will go up to Aquarius, go into Aquarius, then come back, move back and forth a little bit. These two will move on. But while these two are going on, when any planets get involved in Aries and Cancer, when any planets get involved in Libra and a Capricorn, it's going to trigger the tension that's there, just sitting like your guitar string. This is like a really tight guitar string, except it's like a big fat cable that's wound so tight that you just touch this thing and it's going to just go off. So we're going to see Christmas time, New Year's time, spring time, summer time, fall time. Those 4 times the sun and Mars will get involved. Right now, Mars is going backward, as we can see right here. Mars has got the red R, it's still moving backward for a couple more months, and then it'll go forward. So when those planets get to those 4 points of the compass, that will really trigger that guitar string. Now, we're very fortunate. I don't know what's going on because it's beyond me to have the Jupiter Neptune continue to be in the sky next to each other. Until recently, they were right next to each other in Pisces. Now one's in Pisces, one's in Aries, so it's starting to lose its effect. But these two are very, very good planets for people trying to solve things at the level where they need to be solved, and that's here. You can see it all around you. You can feel it within yourself. Maybe I've not made the greatest spiritual progress here and there, but I better get with it now. That's the attitude right now. People are getting a new attitude where they're not looking for the big company, corporation, government to save them. That was destroyed when Pluto spends its last 13, 14 years going through Capricorn, ever since 2008 when the market fell. That's when Pluto, as I've always told you, Capricorn rules things with pillars. institutions with pillars. And Pluto has crashed many of them. It's made us lose faith in them. It's shown them full of corruption. It is fixing some. It's working on it. But Eliza and I have been talking about this. What your institutions, what do you feel like now versus me asking you this 10 years ago? What do you feel like now with your military, with your government, with your churches, with your institutions, with your sports teams, with your law profession? I mean, in every case, it's time for renewal. My problem has been not so much with the Pluto heirs. My problem has been that the patient has been on the table, undergoing so much extraction of corruption. How much can the client take? How much can it take? That's the real question. So as this goes on during the next year, this takes a fine astrological mind. These things are not easy, but we're definitely seeing, and the other astrologers are not going to agree with me, and that's okay, because I'll listen to what they got to say. Pluto Eris is the story for the whole next year. And Pluto Eris is about when you take this new slot, it's like taking a slot out of the computer, putting in a new slot in the computer chip. When you put this in new computer chip in there, and you take out the one that says, be idle, take it easy, have fun, don't worry, play video games. And you put in the new chip that says, all change is going to take place that's needed to change. All people that have been ignored are going to be dealt with. We're going to deal with things that we have to. Well, what do you think is going to happen to all these little droids walking around the planet? What's going to happen? One of the worst things that is happening is we're doing this. They're blaming them, they're blaming them. That's not going to work. Cooler heads have to prevail. We need to come to the table and realize what we've done and hold hands with the other countries to figure out our way out, because, oh, by the way, there is this thing called the climate. So you see what's happening. So it's going to be really impactful for the next year. Another year later, it's going to start easing up. When the Pluto starts to move, it's going to ease up. But keep in mind now, when you watch Pluto, I'll go back over this for you. When you're examining Pluto as a new astrologer, if I can get it on the right screen, there we go. Okay. Pluto spends about 13 years in Sag, about 15 years here. Opposite is 30. So Pluto's anywhere from 13 to 30, because it's on a real radical oval. It comes by the sun and goes way out. It comes sweeping by the sun and goes way out. Well, you line that up with the outer planets, when you line it up with the constellations, Pluto will spend as small as 13 years in Sag, but 30 years over in Gemini. So you have to keep that in mind when you're watching this. So as we're getting this really bombarded T-square now, things are scary, and we're hearing all this talk about fascism and all that, which is the Pluto Eris. As it breaks up, it's going to get easier. It's going to get easier, but it's not going to be easy. We're already doing pretty well. We're upon this age already. We've talked about it for years that it was coming. And as Pluto moves into the next sign, we're going to have different issues. Eris is going to still be bugging us like it always does. It's going to be 20 more years until Eris comes out of Aries and goes into Taurus. Then we're going to be dealing with Uranus coming out of Taurus and Uranus going into Gemini. That's going to be wild. Saturn coming out of Aquarius, moving into Pisces. Lots of shifts going on. But what's happening now is the next year, right now and for the next year, you're going to feel this thing inside. These things are not out there. You're going to feel this stirring inside. I've got to do something. I can't keep closing my eyes to the American Indian. I can't keep closing my eyes to the way the Black people have been treated in this country. And we're real good about closing our eyes because we are a cancer country. And cancer will close its eyes if it means they're going to be safe. Every sign's got one thing that's important to them. For cancer is being safe. Every sign has to have one thing that's important, that's primary to them. So as we go along, we're probably going to get more and more used to this. We're going to start seeing people speak up more, and that's really, really critical. You're seeing it already. And a lot of people don't want to speak up because they think that they're rowdy or they think that they're stirring things up or whatever. But when you have these two planets at the position where they are, we're going to suffer greatly if we don't speak up, period. You don't have to yell, but we're going to have to speak up. That's the number one thing I see for the next year. Look what the Iranian soccer team, the women's team, what the Iranian something team, they took their hijabs off, all the girls, all the women, marvelous stuff. West meets East, East meets West. So we're going to have to do it, and it's really hard because we just met each other. We just met each other on the field of battle in '95 when Windows came out. And you could click and be in another country and click and talk to some guy in Israel and all this stuff. There was a typo about the Supreme Court. What are you saying, John?
I was thinking in the context of all this, what the Supreme Court's chart would be like for the next year. But that's a step you can't take where you are right now. I've just a thought.
No, I could. I just don't have the Supreme Court chart. We could lay this chart over top of it. Yes, I could do that. But I don't have to tell you. You've been watching. You've been intuiting for years now. What do you think happened to the Supreme Court in the last 6-7 years?
It got stacked.
Pluto. Pluto. It got corrupted. It lost its innocence. It lost its mission statement. That's the end when Pluto loses its mission statement is when Pluto gets nasty. There's got to be a planet here that holds you to your mission statement. That's what Pluto does. And for the longest time, we were okay till the 50s, 60s, instead of start changing the manipulation of the Supreme Court, etc. Well, now we've messed with it because it's an eternal thing. Practically, these people stay in their jobs lifelong, and getting them out won't be easy. And we're not getting them in there for the proper reasons. I've worked at a lot of colleges in my life, and when we would lose a president or a dean or something, we would form a committee, and we would entertain couple dozen different people for the job. Who's best for the job? That's not happening. We all know what game is going on. Okay? So that's the big story that's going on with the chart. The best you can do is speak up, speak out, and go with these forces, these social forces that want to help people who've been down and out, speak up and fight for them. And if you don't, you're not going to get away with it. Cancer is deceptive. You're not going to get away with your head beneath the rock. You're not going to get away with it. Promise. The rock's going to crush your head. Evolution doesn't allow it. But the great thing that we've seen with the planets that I try to mention so often is these planets will help you if you try. They will help you. It's kind of like I keep repeating that in your life, these planets come by, what's gotten into him? These shoes come up through you. This Jupiter shoot comes up, this Saturn shoot comes up, this Eris shoot comes up, and they're all a little bit different. They're all reaching towards the sky and reaching towards the water, and you got to kind of help them. You got to kind of help them. Help them out. Give them a little water. Point them towards the sun. You don't have to do the work, but just help them a little bit. And if you don't, what do you think is going to happen to you as a plant if all you do is this? All your shoots are coming up through you, and all you're doing this is pushing it down. You think you're going to be safe. That's our biggest problem in America, is being safe. Being obsessed with being safe. Go talk to Europeans about being safe. Talk to the French. Talk to the Germans. Talk to the Brits. So that's the story. And the way you will see February, March, April, the way you will start to see if we're really advancing along proper course is if you see our laws starting to change that are helping people become victorious again, helping people become more included again, people speaking out. But if people recoil and try to hide with the head in the sand, they're going to get their heads knocked off. Okay, now let's go back to the chart. There's a lot of things in here. Now, okay. So we're seeing Pluto, Venus, Mercury. This is nothing to laugh at. These are very close. 4 degrees away, 0 degrees away. Forget the square, just the Pluto, Venus, Mercury in the 3rd house and the 4th house. Pluto, Venus, Mercury conjuncting for the year. That is symbolic that we're going to be trying to use our art and use our music and use our art education to help us to grow and to help us become richer with the theater, etc., etc. We want to put our arms around it. And then we see with so many different types of government that want, what they want to do first thing is get rid of the arts and stifle the music. That can't happen. You're going to also have another barometer in front of you to see clearly how are the arts being treated. It's going to be another really good, accurate barometer for you. Let's see what else we got. Mars is going to be up in Gemini for the year, the highest planet in the chart. It's retrograde, but what this is going into the atmosphere, going into the broad atmosphere, and jack of all trades, all kind of people putting out websites, all kind of people putting out blogs, just all kind of stuff. You see everybody in the world is putting out their own blog, you know, their own little story. And this is a good thing. And while it's retrograde, we can't make too much of it yet. We can't take it too seriously. But we're going to start to see in a couple months when Mars turns forward and it starts heading towards the midheaven. What the midheaven is going to do is the world's going to say, am I ready for all this? Am I ready for all this super change? Am I ready for everybody and their mother writing a biography? Like December of 2011, when we put our book out, everybody wrote a biography. That was the month the Kindle came out. Everybody was an author. So we're going to start to see the glut that's coming to us through Netflix, through Amazon Prime. We're just being glutted with just so much media stuff. So we're going to see how the world adapts to it. And another thing that's going to happen with that, how much of this, what do they call it? When you're watching a show, how much of this glut when you're watching 8, 10, 12, 15, 30 episodes in a row,
Binge watching.
binge watching, thank you, can always depend on, Erica is the word for me. How much of the binge watching is hiding? How much of the binge watching is hiding? Not hiding, hiding. How much of it is symbolic of us of hiding from the stuff we got to do? I'm not going to make a political comment there. I'm bringing up the question. An easy question. Okay. So you cannot take a look at this chart without taking a look at the USA's chart. And I will bring that one up. The one that was modified by Dane Rudger. This one here. There's a lot of arguments as to which of the USA's chart is accurate. A lot of people argue it. I use this one, and there are good reasons to use other ones. So remember now, while this is all going on and you're getting your feet wet on Broadway Avenue during New Year's Eve, remember, Pluto is still in this area. This is the birth chart, 1776, July 4th. We don't know the time. Matter of fact, we're not even sure the day is right. Some people say July 2nd. There's lots of arguments, and it'll go on forever until we get some finer computer skills, which will help us figure this out. But this chart's probably pretty close. We got the Pluto return going on. Forget everything else on the board. Pluto is back where Pluto was. This is still going on. This wasn't just a few minutes last January, last February. This is going to go on at least 10, 20 more years. Who are we? Who are we going to be? What is our new mission statement? We've got to write it and we've got to adhere to it. That's what the Pluto means. What else does the Pluto return mean? I came back to you after all these years, Pluto says. I came back to you after all these years. Yeah, you discovered me in 1930. But after you found that immense power, Pluto, what did you do with it? Pluto power, plutonium, atomic weapons, H-bombs, nuclear energy, all kind of good and bad. What'd you do with it? What Pluto means as the masses. When you talk about people, the public, Pluto rules the masses in terms of the Holocaust. It can be a positive Holocaust, a negative Holocaust. Massively great things happening to the masses, massively the opposite. But the point about Pluto is you're not going to be able to avoid it. It must be dealt with. That's going to go on all year. And while it's going on, it's got Neptune opposite Neptune. So Neptune has gone around once, and it's over here now. So Neptune's opposite Neptune. So while Neptune is opposite Neptune, what do you think that is? I think it's wonderful, actually. I think the churches are falling apart. And I'm all for the churches staying together where they were speaking the truth where they're not aligned and using the people, where they're helping each other move forward, but they're not hiding from true spirit. And I think a lot of the churches have a lot of things to hide, and they're coming out into the light now. And they're being replaced by people who are doing their own spirituality. I don't know about you, but I spent all week on Zoom with people trying to advance themselves spiritually. And I see nothing but people all around doing the same thing. And I think it's wonderful and it's really good. But when Neptune is opposite Neptune, it's very vague. It's very much like standing on quicksand. You're not sure what to do. The God that you once counted on, you can't count on anymore. With the Republicans, you're seeing the smoke and mirror side of Neptune. So the good side is we're trying to replace the aspiritual with the proper spiritual lessons, where we're getting good meditation, good breathing techniques, good yoga practices. We're seeing a lot of people are really benefiting. People have strong spiritual practices all day long. I'm seeing it more and more and more. This wasn't that way 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It was just getting started. So that's one of the really good things. And you see it's going on hand in hand. The Neptune opposite the Neptune is going on while the Pluto return is working. And the air is square. So one of the real big, excuse me, objectively speaking, one of the major things we have to deal with is the decay of the Republican Party. I told you in 20 years ago, I told you in 2018 that they were going to have a Neptune return in their chart. And they did. What did that imply? That implies you're going to be tested as to whether you're really spiritual. Do you really have it in your heart? Or are you faking everybody out with smoke and mirrors? You saw what happened. And Neptune leads to big time decay. It leads to spiritual bankruptcy. Okay. Then I'm looking at the books. This was about 6 and 8 months ago, and my mouth fell open because I knew the Neptune return was in the GOP's chart, and I found out at the same time the GOP was having a Uranus return. A Uranus return, 284 is 168. So if your Neptune has returned and given you a F- on your report card, which means you're left in a pile of mud and water and nowhere to go, how do you pick yourself up right away? Do you see any talk in the GOP, in the grand old party? Do you see any talk about reviving the country spiritually? No, you see money, 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 money. So therefore, what do you think is going to happen to the same entity that's now got a Uranus return? That just happened recently. Uranus return is a time of new rebellion, industrial revolution, great revolution with techno high-tech stuff. What are you going to build it on? What are you going to build it with? So what Uranus does, Uranus is a weird planet. When Uranus acts and cannot act with a healthy venue, with healthy elements, it contorts. It becomes mutated. How can you have Neptune fall apart and Uranus return come along and be healthy? It ain't possible. So Uranus is, Neptune is sleight of hand. Uranus is fast sleight of hand. That's what's happening now. That's what's happening. And then on top of all this, you've got the overall overreaching attitude of we want to fix things. We want to fix things that have been broken for a long time. So what's interesting about all this, there's a lot of forces at play that are indicating that we've got to take the power away from the USA. Most people in the world feel that the biggest danger in the world is us by their surveys. At the same time, they want us to be in power. They trust us. We've done it for a long time. We give them lots of wheat, lots of money. So what's going to happen? They're going to trust us, get behind us, or not? Which one? So those are the stories. Those are the stories of 2023. Those are the stories. The collective working through us inside, the collective working through us as brothers and sisters to work together as a predecessor to all the Uranian energy coming, the age of Aquarius coming, the Pluto in Aquarius coming, all those wonderful promises. At the same time, these clashes between the media and what is made up. So I'm going to open the, there's really not much more I can say. I'm going to open the microphones up to you for questions, statements, things that we can investigate, because I'm sure this stuff has generated a lot of questions with you too. Anybody? Tasha, what do you see as an experienced astrologer? I know you're out in California, you've been doing this a long time. What are you seeing along the same lines of what I talked about tonight? You are muted.
There we go. Hi, sure. Mercury squared Eris is fascinating, and I loved what you said about it. I see her as Wonder Woman. I kind of found her around the time that I watched that first Wonder Woman movie, and I went, wow, she's a kick-ass goddess. She is she's a shit disturber, and I love her for that.
Yeah, that's right.
And I see her opening, I have Juno at 24 Pisces and Neptune at 22 Pisces. So I see her in an opening 30-degree aspect from Neptune, which I think, that's kind of like that Chinese expression I like, Charlie Wong just getting started. Somebody said that to me a long time ago. It's probably not a real expression, but she's just getting started, like really
Yes.
taking away our blinders, right? And
Yeah.
the square to Mercury, Venus, and Pluto is like, yeah, because your values suck, people.
To put it bluntly.
To put it bluntly. And then
Huh?
I think Eris is also saying to us, with the sextile, the opening sextile to Saturn, and she's retrograde, so she's going to make that sextile again. Yeah, but you can take these sucky values and you can actually start sharing and caring, Aquarius, and you can start thinking about community and you can start collaborating with people. That's why I came to your talk. I wanted to see how other astrologers are talking about everything, because I've been writing books and kind of being a hermit for a couple of years. And so this is me with Saturn and Aquarius going, what's everybody saying?
Well, I think it's very similar to what you brought up. I think they're very good points. John, Dr. John, what do you think?
You mean me?
No, this is the real doctor. No,
Oh,
not the Esquire.
Esquires. He's a doctor in his own right. Yeah,
That's right. And a poet.
I'm feeling the change, Rick, and everyone. I feel like I'm watching, like, as I look around, I see like subtle shifts. Like I do energy work, but I've also studied with Rick. For those of you who don't know, he's been my teacher. I know there's going to be leadership changes in organizations, big and small, and I've seen that happen in some around me. And I think it's always the case that when we see Pluto change signs, like there's like an outgoing, big news, Pelosi. Yes, the Democrats lost the majority in the House, but I think it was just her time. I think it's just her time and I think we're starting to see the generational shift come in with the shift in the energies. I think we're going to see a lot more of that over the next few years. Something you said really resonated with me too, Rick, and I think it is that we're seeing the spirituality, that more and more people are really leaning strongly into that. I'm curious how Saturn going into Pisces is going to challenge some of that. I think people are going to, because I also heard you say there's not a whole lot of depth right now. That's kind of all over the place with the Neptune opposition. With the U.S. chart, I do think that people are going to be challenged to maybe make some of it a little bit more concrete. And I think we'll see that during the next 2
I think
years.
you'll see some churches trying in vain to change some of the rules erroneously.
One more thing I'll add, and it's Ohio. I mean, we had mixed results during our political election, and Ohio was one of the big losers, I would say. We have J.D. Vance now as a senator. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't like it, but there is a movement afoot. It's called it's all around ranked choice voting, and there's a whole movement now in Ohio that's really pushing this forward, as it is happening in several states. I think Alaska already has put something like that in place, and several other states are looking at it. I think this might be the thing that maybe catches fire across the country and starts to bring back a little bit more compromise, and also looking at. I think more voices get to be heard in our politics.
Could you explain a little deeper?
Yeah, so ranked choice voting is, as you know, we're in a winner take all system, first past the post. So if you get 51% of the votes, you win. But actually, you're cutting out a lot of other people in the process. So many of our districts have been so gerrymandered to the point that, if you live in a district like I happen to be in a Democratic district now, but, for a long time I was in a Republican district in the city. My voice didn't actually matter because you had this big swath of area that was going out to rural counties and other places. And it's set up intentionally that way to marginalize anyone who doesn't vote Republican. And, my view is we need to do something that allows more voices into the system. It really shouldn't be just a one party system, not even just all Democrats. Everybody should have a voice. And ranked choice voting allows you to actually rank the order of the candidates, based upon who you think is going to do what and all. But in the end, it comes out to basically you get to choose, and it invites compromise rather than, okay, I'm going to be stuck in my ideology. I'm going to consistently vote for one or the other. So one thing that's happened, and I don't know if anybody's read this, in Alaska, they have, I think in the Alaskan legislature, the Democrats and the Republicans have actually come together, and I think they formed a general caucus where they're all in agreement. It's a big coalition that they're going to work together. This is unheard of in 2022. The parties at each other's throats typically, but in Alaska, they're actually hey, we can come together, and it is because of ranked choice voting that this has been encouraged.
I think that's awesome, because I'll be honest with you. I've taken the last 6-7 years, and I've gone out on Facebook, and besides Americans' budget, I've asked people that are GOP favorites to tell me one good thing that they've done in the last 7 years, beside passing the budget, which I had to. I still haven't got an answer from anybody. So working together sounds really good. What people don't know, and that's why they look to astrologers, what people don't know is these mysterious forces. We think we can control all these energies. You can't. Could you control the 60s when Uranus and Pluto came in together? Look what happened. Boom. You can't control these energies, but you can choose to work with them or try to work against them. And that's really foolish because you just can't work against them because they're the energies, they are the building blocks. If that's happening, you're just choosing what way you're going to die. So your choice really is to get with the planets or to get with the planets. That's about how I see it. Claudia, John, Sigmund, anybody?
Well, I feel,
Well, I have a hold on one moment. I have somebody who wants to make an observation.
okay.
Hold on. Go ahead, Taylor.
Hey, that's me. Hello. I don't have video. An observation of the country in the last couple of years, ever since the 2022, ever since 2020 summer with the BLM protests. I saw a big shift there with the young people, the young left coming out and rightfully saying that the entire society is morally bankrupt. We were saying it in the streets and people got scared and they dug their heels. And when I was watching the live streams of the protests going on, the chat rooms were full of people calling for the police to kill us. So what it did was it showed the country showed its teeth. The cops showed their teeth, and even the Democratic mayors in the cities were the people calling for the feds to come in and quell the protests. So we learned that relying on the state is not going to do anything to change the system at all. But what happened is a lot of the young left, they don't see it as giving up, but I see it as they got discouraged and they gave up, and they don't vote, and they say, well, it's all messed up anyway, and it's all corrupt, so I'm not even going to participate. But what that is a type of millenarism. It's a type of waiting for a messiah. They're waiting for some kind of revolution to come, and it's not going to come unless they step forward and take action and have conversations with other people. So I think that has been the failure of the young left. The failure of the older left and the middle ground, the centrists, has been not being too afraid to jump on board and clinging to the idea of small changes and long-term holding out and voting in local elections is the only means of change. So the young people are too impatient to do any of that legwork, and the older crowd is too afraid to get out in the streets. And since they're not communicating with each other and they're saying, okay, boomer, and just making fun of each other, nothing's happening. Meanwhile, the right is forming a coalition despite their differences, and they're all working together and they're all getting out and voting. But I see a schism in the right as well, and I saw that in 2020. I saw the moderate people who were socially conservative and fiscally conservative, but they weren't like maniac fascists. I see them feeling disenfranchised and being alienated by a party that they no longer recognize or agree with. A lot of them jumped ship when Trump came to power, and they went with the Democrats. A lot of them, I guess, just stuck around. I don't know how they can justify that with themselves, but they do. But then the fascists exploded, and I watched it happen. So I am 36, and I watched people my age and younger, like not Gen Z, but younger millennials. I'm trying to be succinct, thank you. hear me out.
Take
It
your
happened
time,
when,
take your time.
okay, this is going to sound goofy to people older than me, but it happened when video games went online and people started putting on headsets and talking to each other. And instead of sitting in the same room with your friend playing games together, they were now connected over the internet. And what I saw is a bunch of 12-year-olds calling each other slurs on the internet. And the whole generation became completely polluted and turned very racist and very vile. And what happened was people like Steve Bannon, who was running a kind of sweatshop in South Korea at the time, getting kids to work 12-hour days, generating e-currency, playing video games. He realized that gamers were mostly young men, and they were very angry and they were very stupid. And he realized that they would be a perfect base for his political aspirations. And he cultivated what is now the alt-right. That all came from young, angry, stupid gamers. And people like me, we've been trying to blow the whistle, but what happens is people older than us don't have the cultural reference points that we do. So they just think we're frothing at the mouth about video games and they dismiss us. But that I saw rise up from the dirt and became what it is. Yeah, 4chan swatting, yes, absolutely. All of that boiled over. It started in the aughts and it just kind of frothed over. That's who the people who turned out for all of these Charlottesville type racist marches and things. It's not the old people who are like the old Republicans who are quietly racist in their easy chairs. It's young people, it's young men who are college educated. They know better, but they don't have any good heroes. And all it takes is a couple right-wing, shit stirrers to stir the pot. And for somebody like Trump to take office and tell them it's okay to be, a bigot. That's all it takes for these people to feel empowered. So now what's happening is I see young people in the left feeling disempowered, young people in the right feeling empowered. I see a rise in fascism, and I see centrists just hiding like with their heads in the sand. And now, only 2 years after BLM, the chant changed from defund the police to, well, we don't really mean defund. Let's just push the money around a little bit. Like, that's not what we really mean. All these morally bankrupt fools just completely watering it down to be more appealing to people who hate them and who aren't going to cooperate anyway.
What happened to you on the streets of Bloomington, Indiana?
Bloomington is a blue bubble in the middle of a very red Indiana. And in Bloomington, we filled the whole town square with BLM people, and we took over the whole town. However, I went and joined BLM protests in the surrounding towns, and it was a very different story. In one town, there were about 12 of us, and the whole town showed up full of guns and waving Trump flags, and bikers riding circles around us like vultures, spitting at us. Some of my friends were threatened at gunpoint. So, they want us dead. And this is nothing new. I mean, you lived through the 60s. It was probably much, much worse then, for all the stories. But
It was worse. It was worse in one way, but we really didn't have the maniacs against us like they do now.
Well, I have to say that
They
I
really
felt
were.
protected because my friends showed up with guns too, as self-defense. So it's a dark time, and that's how it is right now. But it's one thing listening to people in Portland, Oregon, but it's another thing talking to people in Indiana. I recognize it's a big country and experiences are different.
Well,
But
thank
what I
you.
wanted to say is I had an insight that this fascism, or these people pretending to be fascists, I think it has everything to do with the Cancerian archetype. I think it has to do with the US and its natal Cancer nature. I think it has to do with xenophobia of all kinds. I think it has to do with fear of change. I think it has to do with back the blue. I think it has to do with moderate Democrats turning around and saying, no, we really need police. I'm scared of rising crime and falling for all that propaganda. I think people are just falling hook, line, and sinker for fascism. And I think it has everything to do with cancer. I'd like to hear your opinion.
I think you're right on track. I think it's brilliant. I don't have anything to add. I think it really is Cancerian. And people have to understand that all the signs have good qualities too, but some of them are really dangerous. And the GOP is a cancer country. It's a cancer organization with a moon in Scorpio. So they're not afraid to do whatever they have. I thought what you had to say was brilliant, and I encourage you to come join us more often. I thought it was really worthwhile.
Thank you.
Yeah, Erica? Oh, Erica said
Appreciate
she-
that.
I'm
Appreciate
sorry,
that, Erica.
Claudia was up next. Claudia, go ahead and unmute yourself, dear.
Yes, Taylor, that was really well put. I live in Georgia and I see what you're saying. You know, here I notice the younger generation, the younger right folks are really just out there. And yet, I mean, I do live in Georgia, so that's one thing, but I do know that this state is growing and growing as far as it being, there's a lot of transients here. There's not very many people here that are from Georgia. And so I see your point in that they're like really very loud about it and very upfront, but the other side really is not. What I was going to say was not really political. It was really more about there's just this sense of urgency that we're feeling. And the sense of urgency is because we haven't been doing what we're, I don't want to say supposed to be doing, but that sense of accountability, personal, community, statewide, globally, it's just gone out the window. And I see it with people's personal lives where they have got to be accountable for themselves emotionally, financially, spiritually.
What John the lawyer, I'm interested in you following up on what Claudia said. You spent a lifetime in the legal profession. What do you see happening in the legal profession as far as accountability?
Well, my involvement in the legal system was I was a trial lawyer, and trial lawyers take a position to advocate for their clients. And somehow, because of their commitment to the law, they hope that there will be some resolution of things. You've got A, you've got B. A's against B, B's against A. And this is what trial lawyers have to do. They have to do the best they can for their clients. But that's not always good if that's all there was to the system. You have to have a good judge, and you have to have judges and laws who are going to apply laws that are really fair and really do implement justice. Our legal system doesn't really do that. And so lawyers, they go to, I like myself, I went to law school. I had been in a seminary. I left the seminary, became a social worker, became a lawyer, thinking that, I'm going to do some good. And what I found myself doing was being a good lawyer. I was very skillful. I could sell the Brooklyn Bridge for my client, but there was something bigger about this that I thought I was involved in, and I only had one piece of it. Somehow the whole system has to be just. And I found sometimes that I was so frustrated with the law as it was that I was accused by judges of grandstanding, by trying to point out that there was something that just was not right. It didn't meet the spirit of this law. It might have met the legality of it.
Exactly.
And that still bothers me. Now I'm retired, so I can think about these things. And I think about my career in the law, and I'm reading about the Supreme Court and how it just has taken a turn for the worse. And that's very frustrating, that at the highest level of the law in this country, you will have results that are not fair, are not just, do not meet what the spirit of the law calls for. And I really worry about that. So when I came home and told my wife, do you know some judge accused me today of grandstanding in court? Do you believe that? And she said, oh, I believe it. You're good at it. But, I follow the things that are going on in the law, the cases involving Trump, and, can the prosecutor meet the standard of the statute to prove a certain element of mind? It's so technical. It is just so technical.
Well, what is going to come in? It sounds to me like the centerpiece of all this is spirit.
It is spirit.
It is living a more true with spiritual dignity. Because if you don't have that, you don't have any institutions that you can lean on. Nothing's based on spirit. Spirit has to come in. I think it all has to come out of the individuals and the new church.
Well, law is not the answer, but something higher is the answer. And that's something, and religion isn't the answer. And people think religion is the highest. No. Somehow people have to change their spirits. They have.
I think that's happening. It's changing quickly, but can it change fast enough?
Well, that'll influence the law if enough people do that. I was really impressed with these midterm elections. I was pretty sure that there were more Democrats than Republicans in this country, and I thought we were going to win. I didn't think there was this red wave coming, and it didn't come. So there is something going on. There is, but it's bigger than the law.
Well, what is it?
I think it's people are just, they have had enough. And
That is Eris.
The young people
had enough as Eris.
Yeah,
and we're all feeling Eris.
Yeah, the young people especially, and women and minorities.
And Marcia?
Miller.
Marcia, go ahead.
And look how Eris is affecting Iranian women and very recently China.
Yeah.
Look what's happening in China. If that doesn't blow the socks off of us, it's incredible. And today I read that the Chinese government is going to relax the COVID restrictions.
Right.
I mean, it's their protests are working in places,
Well,
not all of it, but in places.
One thing would fix all this. If we all realize that Eris is here, she's ass-kicking powerful, and she ain't going to stop. If we all understood that, but we don't have any reason to understand it because she's a new planet. Most astrologers don't even watch her, but she's here, and you're right. She's the force that makes you fed up. Dr. John, what were you saying, Dr. John?
Oh, I was just adding some insights. There's a little bit of a chat going on there, Rick, but I was just speaking. The one point I wanted to make earlier that I kind of forgot, and just hearing Taylor speak into it, very good, Taylor, by the way. But others, John, and so many, Claudia. It brings me back to Pluto and Capricorn. The fact that we have Pluto natally in the U.S. chart, I think it empowers the right wing. I think Pluto pushes Capricorn to the most extreme place it can be. Make sure conservative no matter what.
Yeah, true.
I think that gives it an edge, and I think that's also where the Republican Party has been so empowered. The leads to status quo, all of this. I think with Pluto moving into Aquarius, we're going to see the edge come off of it. It's still there, but I do think more opportunities for fair representation will come up. That's not a guarantee by any means. means, but I do think I like, there's so many things. It's going to take more time than what I have to say it. And I see a movement toward, we got to think about what people have in their charts too, though. I'm Pluto and Libra. There's a lot of us around. Yeah, we've seen people like Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene that are also Pluto and Libra, representing the more right-wing side of that. But I feel like the rest of us are going to be activated that have been quiet and a little bit more progressive. With Pluto trining our natal Plutos, I think a whole generation of us is about to rise up and bring a different voice to the picture, both politically in office, but also on the ground too. I think we are going to see different voices and different leadership rise up. I also think, all the love in the world for, the progressive minded boomers and people like you, Rick. But, we've also got Pluto opposing Pluto and Leo, the Pluto and Leo boomer generation. And so I think that's going to be that shove to say, hey guys, it's time to step aside and pass the torch.
I think you're
Pluto
right.
and Leo doesn't want to do that.
Well, I think you're right, but I think we're getting older, and I don't think you have as much trouble as you think.
Yeah,
What's
the other thing I just want to add, Rick, is I do think that it is, the other thing I mentioned was Eris is squaring our natal Pluto in the United States. Like, it's going to be like we had the Pluto square or Eris Pluto square by transit. Now we also have Eris moving forward. It's still in Aries. She's still in Aries, but she's moving up to our 27-degree natal Pluto in the U.S. chart. What is that going to do to our power structure?
I forgot about that.
That's
That's a revolution of power.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you see with the higher ed, Linda?
Sorry. I don't know. Right now, I just think there's so much effort at dismantling education in this country that and by that I mean forbidding people to teach history and talking about teachers as groomers and not hiring full-time people and just hiring contingent or adjunct faculty and paying them almost nothing. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say where we're going with this. What I see with young people, I think young people are fed up with all this stuff. I truly do. There's a handful. I have a handful of students who are probably raised by ultra conservative people and vote the same way their parents do. But for the most part, they just think it's all ridiculous, and they don't want to. Don't want to live in a country where people act this way. They're not pro-Nazi. They're not any of that stuff. And so I'm not as worried about the future as maybe I would be otherwise. But one challenge the whole country has is to decide that we want if we want kids to be educated, because I don't think there's a consensus about that right now. I mean that exactly seriously. I don't know that there's a consensus that we want them to actually be educated, be able to think critically,
that's deadly.
To be able to think critically, to know history, to not be afraid to confront the shadow side of American history. We studied this semester. We studied right-wing terrorism in my research class. And I had kids from all over the world in that class. So they wrote papers on Peru and Boko Haram and Uganda and Nigeria and all kinds of places where this is a problem. They wrote about the history of the Klan, and kids are interested in this, and they don't necessarily want to go down that road, but I'm in a small Catholic institution where nobody tells me what I have to teach. I can actually teach things and teach them how to think and give them material and let them choose their path and help guide them. But, in the secondary schools right now, it's, being bleached out of textbooks, because most of your textbooks come out of Texas, because Texas is a state adoption state. So you're going to get textbooks with bleached history that don't want to deal with slavery or Reconstruction or Jim Crow or any of that. They'd like to pretend that didn't happen because it makes people uncomfortable. Well, education is supposed to make you uncomfortable. It should not affirm what you learned when you were 4 years old at grandpa's knee. So I'm really tired today. So I'm just done with my rant, but
That's okay. Everybody can rant a little bit.
We
That's
like
all
it.
right.
We like it.
okay, well, just start talking to your local school boards and say, we want our kids to be educated. And we're not afraid of what that means. That's the one thing I would say. Run for the school board.
That's another good one. Well, we sure did it tonight. Thank you, Taylor, for showing up. That was wonderful. I must say to everybody, the thing that we don't realize, and I'm going to get on the air on January 5th with Ksenia and talk about blowing it out more in favor of astrology and what it can do. I'm also going to have a show with the woman who interviewed me on here, Clarissa Berkman, and she has a really broad background out of California. And we are going to talk about the myth, say that word, myths, the myths of the New Age movement, such as you can't get angry, such as you got to be nice, such as you got to forgive everybody, you got to talk in a low voice. In other words, don't speak up. And we're going to talk about the myths of the, such as killing the ego, the myths of the New Age movement that have caught on us in a sleepy way, and they're really affecting us. So we got both things happening. We got corrupt, old, stale religion, and we got corrupt, ill-meaning spirituality. So we need revolutions on that level too. But what people need to realize, and this is the thing I want to do on this show, is these planets are symbolic of energy coming to your heart. And they're coming to you from the G word, God, whatever you want to call it. They're symbolic. Most of these planets are very well-meaning. They're trying to get us to work together in a healthy way. We need to get people to start to understand what got into you, what got into him. Those are universal ties that shows us how we're connected. And only through that connection do I think we're going to start seeing these positive growths. But anyhow, all of you, thank you so much for tonight. It was just wonderful. I don't know what next week will be, and I will be off the last Thursdays of December, the last two, and back on January 15th. So I apologize to people who were clicking last week and I wasn't here. And I was on Thanksgiving. Great to have Taylor here tonight. Great to have all of you. Love you all. See you next week.
See you next week. Hi,
Love
Taylor.
you too. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Night.
Thank you. Wonderful.